For 6 years, Sergeant Barrett Keating believed his K-9 partner died in a harbor explosion. He kept the old leash hidden in his truck because throwing it away felt like betrayal. Then one snowy morning, at a small animal refuge in Maine, a German shepherd heard his voice. The dog was older, thinner, and living under a name that was never his. But when Barrett whispered Strider, the dog pushed against the fence like he had been waiting his whole life to come home. What happened next was not just a reunion, it was a fight to give one loyal K-9 back his name, his peace, and his right to rest. Tell us where you're watching from, and please like, share, and subscribe for more stories of loyalty, justice, and second chances. The last thing Sergeant Barrett Von Keating remembered clearly from North Haven was not the blast. It was Strider turning his head. The service corridor beneath the harbor warehouse had been narrow, damp, and yellow with emergency light. Somewhere above them, firefighters were calling through smoke. Somewhere ahead, a federal tech had warned that one of the detection meters was giving an ugly reading near the old fuel access room. Barrett had been 42 then, still a working K-9 handler, still young enough to believe that if he moved quickly and did everything right, the world would respond in kind. Strider had walked half a step ahead of him, black and tan coat darkened with soot, ears alert, body low with purpose. Barrett remembered the small white puff of the dog's breath in the cold air. He remembered the way Strider paused near a buckled doorframe and glanced back once, waiting for the hand signal. Then the corridor opened in white fire and thunder. After that, memory came in broken pieces, his left leg pinned beneath a fallen steel beam, his radio shouting voices he could not answer, a weight at his shoulder, Strider's teeth gripping the back strap of his tactical vest, pulling, digging, refusing to let go even when Barrett tried to push himself up and failed. The dog's paws scraped over concrete. The ceiling moaned somewhere above them. Barrett remembered being dragged into colder air. He remembered coughing until the world blurred. Then another sound came from inside the smoke, not a bark, not quite a scream, but a human voice trapped behind metal and flame. Strider heard it too. Barrett felt the dog's body leave his side. Strider, he tried to say. The name came out as nothing. The German shepherd disappeared back into the smoke. That was the last time Barrett saw him. They told him later how the search had gone. Thermal cameras, rescue crews, divers along the broken pier, calls to clinics, shelters, transport teams. Every place an injured working dog might have been taken. They found Strider's K-9 vest caught in the wreckage. They found his identification collar twisted around a section of bent railing. They did not find a body. For months, the official wording remained careful. Missing following critical incident. Then winter passed. Spring thawed the harbor. No new report arrived, no paw prints, no witness, no miracle wandering down a coastal road. The file was changed, administratively presumed killed in the line of duty. Barrett signed the receipt for Strider's recovered gear with his right hand because the left one still trembled. He stood through the small memorial. He accepted condolences from men who could not look him in the eye. He let Deputy Chief Silas Pierce place a hand on his shoulder, and he nodded because people expected grief to have manners, but at home he could not throw away the bowl. 6 years later, the bowl was still upside down on the shelf beside Barrett's laundry room, clean enough to shine and useless enough to hurt. The old leash was in the bed of his pickup under a folded tarp, where he would not have to see it unless something shifted. Snow fell lightly over Greyhaven that morning, the kind of bright coastal snow that made every roofline look gentle before the wind had time to harden it. The harbor water beyond Main Street was blue steel beneath the winter sun. Fishing boats knocked softly against their lines, and gulls stood like pale scraps of paper along the frozen edges of the dock. Barrett parked outside Winter Harbor Animal Refuge just after 9. He wore his dark navy patrol jacket over a gray sweater, the badge clipped at his belt instead of pinned bright on his chest. His hair, dark chestnut with gray at the temples, was damp from melted snow by the time he lifted 3 bags of food from the truck bed. He moved with a slight favoring of his left leg, not enough for most people to notice. enough that he noticed every morning before coffee. Inside the refuge, the air smelled of disinfectant, old blankets, dog food, and the sweet burnt edge of overworked heaters. A spaniel barked twice from the front office, then gave up when no drama followed. Celia Morgan Harlow met him near the supply shelf with a clipboard tucked beneath one arm and a pencil behind her ear. She was in her usual quilted vest and mud-dark boots, silver-brown hair tied low, one loose strand falling near her left temple no matter how often she pushed it back. "You brought food again," she said. "Truck was already pointed this way. That's a lie with excellent nutritional value." Barrett almost smiled. Celia had managed the refuge long enough to know when a joke could carry more kindness than a question. She never asked why he fixed things for free. She never asked why he brought blankets every November. Most important, she never asked why he avoided the back kennels where the shepherds were kept. "The isolation heater quit sometime before dawn," she said, turning toward the rear hallway. "Breaker didn't trip. It just stopped pretending it wanted to live." "Sounds familiar. That was darker than I deserved at 9 in the morning." He followed her down the narrow hall. Snowlight came through the high windows in pale strips, brightening the concrete floor. Dogs shifted behind doors, some curious, some anxious nails clicking softly. Barrett kept his eyes on the heater panel ahead. Wires, switches, rusted screws. These things did not ask him to be whole. He knelt in the utility alcove and opened the panel. The system gave a weak mechanical cough, then went quiet again. Barrett set his tools out in a neat line. For several minutes there was only the controlled rhythm of work. Then a whimper passed through the frosted glass of the isolation door. Small, thin, almost swallowed by the hum of the building. Barrett's hand stopped on the wrench. He hated that his body still answered certain sounds before his mind could give permission. The old pressure closed around his ribs, sharp and clean. A dog in distress, a hallway, a moment too late. Celia, standing 3 steps behind him, said nothing. That was why he kept coming back. He tightened the loose connection, reset the system, and waited. The heater shuddered, coughed, then came alive with a low, steady breath. Warm air began moving through the vent above them. "Good," Celia said softly. "The 2 new ones were shaking all night." "New ones?" She gave him a look that was not quite careful enough to be accidental. 4 German shepherds came in from a multi-agency seizure in Vermont. They're under county custodial hold, not adoptable yet. Barrett kept his face toward the panel. "Celia, I'm not asking you to take one. That sounded close. I'm saying some dogs don't need a handler. Some just need a quiet place where nobody asks them to be useful." The words settled between them with more weight than the heater in front of him. Barrett wiped his fingers on a shop rag. Outside, sunlight flashed off snow in the parking lot, too bright for the season. His truck sat near the side gate, and beneath the tarp in the bed was the leash he had moved from house to truck to storage shelf and back again for 6 years because no place was the right place for it. "I'm not looking for a dog," he said. "I know." He closed the panel. Maybe one day. The answer surprised him so much that he stood too quickly and had to shift weight off his left knee. Celia noticed. She always noticed, but she only nodded once, as if the words were a small animal that had stepped into the open and should not be frightened away. Then a bark came from the far end of the rear kennels, hoarse, broken at the end. Barrett turned before he knew he had moved. The bark came again. His breath shortened. He walked first, then faster, boots striking concrete with a sound that seemed to belong to someone younger and less afraid. Celia followed at a distance, keys silent in her hand. At the final kennel, a German shepherd stood behind the door. The dog was old, gray around the muzzle, one ear lower than the other, eyes tired but gentle. His ribs showed faintly beneath a dull black and tan coat. He stared at Barrett with the wary hope of an animal that had learned not to ask too loudly. For one impossible second, Barrett's heart stepped toward him. Then it stopped. Not the head shape, not the eyes, not the angle of the ears, not Strider. Shame rose so quickly, Barrett felt heat beneath his collar. This dog had not called him from the past. This dog had only barked. a frightened old shepherd behind a shelter door, and Barrett had arrived carrying 6 years of need like a debt the animal was supposed to pay. He lowered himself to one knee. "Hey, buddy," he murmured. The shepherd hesitated, then pushed his nose toward the gap near the hinge. Barrett held out his hand, palm down and still. The dog sniffed his fingers, gave one soft breath, and leaned closer. Barrett stayed longer than he needed to. Partly for the dog. Partly because leaving too quickly would feel like losing Strider all over again and blaming the wrong creature for it. When he finally stood, Celia was near the corner. "He's called Marlowe," she said. "Terrible name. Came with it. He's kind. He is." Barrett nodded once, the way men nod when words might pull loose something they are trying to keep tied down. He thanked her for calling about the heater and walked back toward the front. The shelter seemed louder now. A metal bowl scraped. A terrier yipped from the office. Somewhere, water dripped steadily into a bucket. Outside, the cold struck his face with clean force. He loaded the toolbox into the pickup and caught sight of the tarp shifting in the wind. A strip of worn brown leather showed beneath it, the leash. Barrett placed one hand on the tailgate and did not move. Maybe one day. He had said it like a man discussing weather, like it cost nothing. But the sentence had opened a door inside him, and behind it was a kitchen floor, a steel bowl, a dog bed folded away because keeping it out had hurt, and putting it away had hurt differently. He pulled the tarp back over the leash. Then he closed the truck door. At the side yard, Evan Pike Dorsey stepped out with a German shepherd on a lead. Evan was young, long-limbed, his mustard knit cap pulled low over unruly blonde hair. He moved the way good shelter workers moved around scared dogs, not slow enough to be strange, not fast enough to be a threat. The dog beside him was thinner than he should have been. His coat was black and tan, soaked dark where snow had melted into it. A dark saddle lay uneven across his back, heavier toward the right side. His chest was a muted cream gold, and one hind leg moved half a beat behind the rest of him. Around his neck, the fur grew in a rough circle, as if something had sat there too long and too tight. "Easy, Bruno," Evan said. "Just air. That's all. Just air." Barrett reached for the gear shift. The truck door clicked shut. The shepherd stopped. Evan looked down. "Bruno?" The dog did not hear him. His head lifted into the bright wind. Snow dusted the black line of his muzzle. His ears trembled, the right one firm, the left tipped slightly outward. Barrett's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. The shepherd turned toward the truck. Then he lunged, not with anger, with recognition so desperate it tore itself into sound. The bark ripped across the snowy yard, rough, cracked, too large for the dog's worn body. Barrett froze behind the windshield. The sound entered him with terrible precision, finding the sealed room he had built around one name. He opened the door and stepped out. The dog went still, only his body shook. Barrett walked toward the fence as if the ground might give way if he moved too fast. Evan held the lead with both hands, eyes wide, but he did not drag the dog back. "Sergeant," he called. Barrett barely heard him. The German shepherd stared at him through the chain link, amber-brown eyes, dark muzzle, a thin silvering along the lower jaw. Barrett stopped 3 feet from the fence. The dog tilted his head to the right, just a fraction. A waiting angle, a question Barrett's hand had once answered hundreds of times. His knees weakened. "No," he whispered, but it was not denial, it was fear. He came closer. Behind the dog's right ear, beneath wet fur and scarred skin, was a pale curved mark almost 4 inches long. Barrett knew that scar. He had cleaned it with bottled water beside a rain ditch after a chase that ended 2 winters before North Haven. He had pressed gauze there while Strider leaned all his weight against his thigh and refused to look away from the road. Barrett's hand lifted toward the fence. Strider. The dog's whole body broke into trembling. Evan stopped breathing for a second. The shepherd pushed forward until the fence bowed slightly under his chest. A sound came from him, not a bark now, not a whine, but something lower and older, pulled from a place no training had ever touched. "Strider," Barrett said again. The dog pressed his face against the metal as if the barrier were an insult he could not understand. Celia came outside fast. then slowed when she saw Barrett's face. "Open the gate," Barrett said. His voice was quiet, but something in it made Evan move. The gate latch clicked. The sound made the dog flinch, but the moment the gap opened, he came through and reached Barrett with one stumbling push. He did not leap like the strong young canine Barrett remembered. He folded into him. Barrett went down on one knee in the snow. The dog pressed his head beneath Barrett's chin, ribs trembling under wet fur. Barrett held him carefully at first, afraid of bones, scars, sore joints, all the things 6 missing years might have done. Then his arms closed around him. Snow fell on Barrett's shoulders. The yard blurred. "I'm sorry," he whispered into the damp coat. "God, I'm sorry." Strider pushed closer. Celia did not touch either of them. Evan stood near the open gate with one hand over his mouth. It took nearly 20 minutes before anyone spoke about what had to happen next. Celia called Hollis May Renner, the county animal control director, because the shepherds from Vermont were not the shelter's property to release. Hollis arrived in a forest green county parka and a burnt orange knit cap, carrying a yellow file folder and the expression of a woman who had spent half her life explaining that kindness without paperwork could still lose a dog. Dr. Elise Harper Monahan came soon after with a canvas medical bag and a calm that changed the air around her. She knelt several feet from Strider, let him smell her sleeve, and did not reach for his neck. Strider stayed pressed against Barrett's leg. Every time someone said "Bruno," he did not move. Every time Barrett said "Strider," his ears shifted toward the sound. Elise checked only what the moment allowed. Breathing, posture, the hitch in the rear leg, the rough circle of damaged fur at the neck. Her face remained controlled, but her eyes softened in a way Barrett did not miss. "He's too stressed to stay in a kennel tonight," she said. Hollis read through the intake form, the seizure hold, the damaged chip note, and Celia's written account of the recognition. Then she looked at Barrett. "This does not make him legally yours," she said. "I understand. It means temporary emergency medical foster under county custodial hold. No transfer, no adoption, no removal from the county without notice. You follow Dr. Monahan's instructions. You answer when I call." "Yes, Mom." Hollis held out the pen. "Then sign here." Barrett's hand shook once before he steadied it. Strider watched the pen move. "The name on the form still," said Bruno. Beneath it, Hollis added a note in blue ink. "Responds consistently to the name Strider." When Barrett opened the rear door of the pickup, Strider hesitated. The truck, the door, the metal latch, all of it seemed to pass through him like weather through a broken window. Barrett placed the old leather leash on the seat where the dog could see it, the worn brown handle, the blue repair stitch. Strider lowered his nose to it. For a long moment, he only breathed. Then, slowly, one paw at a time, he climbed into the truck. Barrett closed the door softly. He stood in the falling snow with the signed foster papers in his hand, knowing that nothing had been solved. Not the missing years, not the wrong name, not the damaged chip, not the question of who had kept Strider alive and away. But Strider was no longer behind a strange fence. And for the first time in 6 years, he left a place that did not know him by the name that did. Strider did not lie down in the truck. Barrett noticed that before they had cleared the refuge road. The German shepherd sat upright on the rear bench with his front paws braced wide, body angled so he could see both side windows and the windshield. Snow streaked the glass in pale lines. The heater clicked softly. Every ordinary sound seemed to arrive at Strider as a question that might turn dangerous if answered wrong. Barrett kept his right hand on the wheel. His left rested low near the gap between the front seats, palm open, fingers still. He wanted to reach back. The wanting came through him with a force that surprised him. 6 years of thinking he would never touch that fur again, never feel the weight of that head against his knee, never say the name and watch the ears turn toward it. But the dog in the back seat was not the dog from the old photographs. This Strider watched doors. This Strider counted movement. This Strider looked at the world as if every place could become a kennel with one wrong sound. So Barrett did nothing more than keep his hand where Strider could see it. A logging truck passed in the opposite lane, chains snapping once against its flatbed. Strider's shoulders tightened, his head dropped half an inch, no bark, no growl. Only the immediate disappearance of softness from his body, as if some unseen command had pressed him smaller. "You're all right," Barrett said. He kept his voice low, not tender enough to sound unfamiliar, not sharp enough to sound like an order. The road curved toward Greyhaven Harbor. Morning light flashed across the water beyond the docks, broken by the masts of wintered boats and the black ribs of old pilings. Snow lay on the roofs of bait shops, police barriers, porch railings, and the bronze statue of a fisherman near the municipal pier. Greyhaven looked peaceful in winter, but Barrett had lived there long enough to know peace and quiet were not the same thing. His house stood at the end of a short lane near the old boatyard, a narrow cedar-sided place with a deep porch, storm windows, and a garage door that needed oiling. The harbor bell sounded faintly through the cold air as Barrett pulled in. He turned the engine off. Strider did not move. Barrett opened his door first, stepped out, then opened the rear door and stood aside. He did not reach for the dog's collar. He did not pat the seat. He did not use the command that would once have brought Strider out in a clean, efficient motion. "Take your time," he said. Strider looked at the house, then the yard, then the road behind them. Snow had gathered along the dog's muzzle and melted into dark beads. His amber-brown eyes moved from one exit to another, measuring a place he had never expected to enter and perhaps did not trust enough to survive. At last he climbed down one paw at a time. His left hind leg lagged, not dramatically, but enough to make Barrett's throat tighten. The front door had stuck all winter. Barrett remembered that only as the latch gave a dull metallic scrape, Strider froze. Barrett stopped with him. He opened the door wider and stepped back, letting the room breathe. The house smelled of coffee, old wood, cold wool, and the sea wind that slipped through imperfect seals around the windows. Barrett had cleaned it the night before without knowing why. A stack of case folders sat squared on the kitchen table. A mug rested beside the sink. A pair of work gloves lay where he had dropped them 2 days ago. Strider crossed the threshold slowly. He did not explore like a dog returning home. He moved like a dog checking whether home had teeth. Nose close to the baseboards, he traced the wall from the entryway to the kitchen. He paused at the back door, sniffed the gap beneath it, then turned to study the narrow hall leading to Barrett's bedroom. He stepped under the table and came out again. He smelled the couch, the rug, the boot tray, the fireplace tools. Barrett remained near the door with the leash loose in his hand. The old dog bed was folded beside the laundry room. Strider did not look at it. Instead, he stopped beneath the open shelf where Barrett kept towels, spare batteries, and things he could not throw away. The steel bowl sat upside down on the second shelf. For 6 years, Barrett had told himself the bowl was there because putting it away properly would have been too final. He had washed it after the memorial, dried it until no water marked the metal, and placed it upside down as if cleanliness could keep grief from spoiling. Now Strider stood beneath it, nose lifted. Barrett felt the moment change shape. The house had not been waiting faithfully. He had. Worse than that, he had made waiting look neat. He reached for the bowl. His hand hesitated on the rim, and for a second he saw the younger Strider standing in the kitchen with snow on his paws, impatient for water after a long shift. He saw himself 6 years earlier, too tired to speak, tapping the bowl with one boot while the dog drank loud enough to fill the whole room. Barrett took it down. He rinsed it under the faucet even though it was already clean. He rinsed it longer than necessary. The sound of water seemed too bright in the quiet kitchen. Strider watched every motion. Barrett dried the outside with a towel, filled the bowl halfway, and set it in the old place near the back door. "There," he said. Strider approached only after Barrett stepped away. He drank slowly, 3 laps, then paused. 3 more, then another pause. His ears shifted toward the road, toward the refrigerator, toward Barrett's breathing. By the time he finished, the sun had moved across the floorboards, and the water in the bowl trembled from the faint vibration of the harbor bell. That first afternoon, Barrett learned the shape of Strider's fear. It was not wild. It was organized. Strider chose the hallway because from there he could see the front door, the back door, the kitchen, and part of the living room. He lowered himself with visible care, keeping the stiff hind leg angled slightly out. He did not close his eyes. Barrett brought a blanket from the couch and placed it several feet away, close enough to offer warmth, far enough not to claim space. Strider watched him set it down. When Barrett backed away, the dog sniffed the blanket once and then ignored it. Night came early, the house filled with small winter sounds. Wind moved under the eaves. A dock chain clanked somewhere near the water. The refrigerator started with a low mechanical hum. Strider rose halfway before he caught himself. Barrett was sitting on the living room floor with his back against the couch. His knee ached, but the ache gave him something ordinary to feel. He placed one hand on the boards between them, palm down, as if setting it there for the house rather than for the dog. He did not succumb. He did not say heal. He did not say anything for a long time. Strider stared at the hand. The fire had burned low enough that the room was mostly shadow. Snowlight from the porch made a pale rectangle on the floor. Barrett listened to the dog's breathing, shallow and guarded, and realized he had spent 6 years imagining reunion as a door opening. He had not imagined this, the beloved creature alive but unable to rest in the same room. Nearly an hour passed before Strider moved. 1 inch, then another. His claws made almost no sound on the wood. He stretched his neck forward, touched his nose to Barrett's fingers, and withdrew. The contact lasted less than a second. Barrett kept his hand still. He did not thank the dog for it. He did not make it into a victory. But something inside him, something that had been clenched since North Haven, loosened just enough to hurt. By morning, Strider had not slept for more than scattered minutes at a time. Barrett brewed coffee he forgot to drink and softened food in warm water until the kitchen smelled faintly of broth. Strider ate half, pushed 3 pieces under the edge of the towel near the bowl, and looked away as if caught doing something he expected to be punished for. Barrett took the towel, shook the pieces gently back into the bowl, and said nothing. Dr. Elise Harper Monahan arrived just after 9 in a faded blue Subaru dusted with road salt. She carried a brown-gray canvas medical bag and wore a slate coat over a teal sweater. Her black hair, threaded with silver, brushed her jaw when she stepped onto the porch. She did not come in like someone bringing answers. She came in like someone asking permission from the air. "Morning, Barrett," she said, "morning." Her eyes moved once to Strider in the hallway, then away before the look could become pressure. "I'm going to sit on your kitchen floor," she said. "If he decides that's rude, I'll reconsider." Barrett almost smiled. He might. Then he has excellent boundaries. Elise set her bag down far from Strider and lowered herself slowly onto the floor. She opened one pocket, removed a folded cloth, and placed it beside her knee. Strider watched the cloth more than her hands. "That's good," she said quietly. "He's tracking objects, not just threat." The exam took nearly 40 minutes, because Elise never asked for more than Strider could give. She looked at his eyes from an angle, checked his teeth only after he had smelled the instrument twice, ran her hands over his ribs with a pressure so light Barrett could barely see the movement. She tested the rear leg by watching him shift weight rather than forcing a full manipulation. Her notes grew longer. Barrett stood near the counter, arms folded, then unfolded them because it felt too much like bracing for bad news. Elise finally sat back on her heels. "He's underweight," she said. "Not recently underfed only. This has duration. His hips are stiff, the left rear worse than the right. Old rib trauma, not treated as cleanly as I'd like. Muscle pattern suggests he was kept working past what his body wanted to tolerate." Barrett looked down at Strider. The dog had placed one paw near Barrett's boot but not on it. "What about his neck?" Elise's expression did not harden, but it became more careful. "I need to look. I won't force it." She let Strider smell her sleeve again. Then she lifted her hand, slow and open, toward the rough ring of fur around his collar line. Strider lowered his head. His ears flattened. His body went still. Not resistant, not aggressive, obedient. The kind of obedience that had no trust in it. Barrett felt something cold move through him. Elise stopped at once and rested both hands on her knees. "All right," she said softly. "We heard you." Strider did not move for 3 long seconds. Then his eyes flicked to Barrett, not asking for rescue exactly, but checking whether rescue was allowed. Barrett crouched several feet away. "You're home," he said. The word home sounded fragile in his mouth. Elise waited until Strider's breathing changed before she continued, touching only what he permitted. When she finished, she wrote for several minutes. "I can't tell you from an exam who did what," she said, "and I won't pretend I can. But the neck pattern is consistent with equipment sitting too tight for too long. The fear response tells me contact there has history. The rest tells me he learned to endure pain quietly." Barrett nodded once. It was the kind of information that should have made him angry. It did, somewhere. But the first feeling was not anger. It was grief with a new address. Elise packed a small bottle of medication and printed instructions onto a sheet she had brought with her. Soft food, same times every day, short walks only. Let him choose open spaces. Keep interior doors open where you can. No sudden collars, no tight handling around the neck. I can do that. And no testing. Barrett looked at her. No old commands to see what he remembers. No gear. No demonstrations. No asking him to prove he's still your dog. I don't need him to prove anything. Elise's gaze moved past him. The laundry room door was half open. Inside, on the top shelf, the old K9 vest lay folded in a clear storage bin, black fabric, faded patch, a piece of the life Barrett had not been able to bury. Elise looked back at him. "Words are easy," she said. "That vest is the test." Barrett did not answer. After she left, he stood in the laundry room for a long time with the bin open. He did not take the vest out. He did not throw it away. In the end, he closed the lid, carried the bin to the garage, and placed it on the highest shelf where he would need a ladder to reach it. It was not healing, but it was a decision. The next few days taught Barrett that recovery did not move in a straight line. On Monday, Strider ate every softened bite in his bowl. On Tuesday, he hid food under the towel again. On Wednesday afternoon, he fell asleep near the fireplace for 23 minutes. Barrett knew because he sat in the chair and watched the clock without meaning to. When Barrett shifted his weight, the floorboard creaked. Strider woke instantly, head up, eyes wide. On Thursday, he carried one of Barrett's gray socks from the laundry pile and placed it near the hearth. Barrett laughed before he could stop himself. Strider froze. The laugh died in Barrett's throat, not because the moment was ruined, but because he understood how easy it was to become too much. He looked toward the window instead. "Poor choice," he said evenly. "That one has no future." Strider stood uncertainly, then nudged the sock with his nose. The next morning he took another. That small theft did more to steady Barrett than any official paper could have done. It was not the old Strider returning whole. It was this Strider, the living one, testing whether ordinary mischief still had a place in the world. Then, late that afternoon, the garage door rattled. A gust of wind hit the side of the house. At the same moment, the loose metal track gave a hard, rolling clang. Strider dropped flat before the sound finished. His legs tucked beneath him, his head pressed low. His eyes emptied of the kitchen and filled with somewhere else. Barrett moved toward him, then stopped himself. Touching too soon would be for Barrett, not for Strider. He sat down on the floor several feet away, ignoring the pain that shot through his left knee. "Easy," he said. "That was the garage." Strider did not blink. "You're in Greyhaven. Kitchen floor, back door open. I'm right here." The words were not magic. They did not pull the dog back all at once. But after a while, Strider's eyes shifted. He found Barrett's face, then his hand. Barrett waited until Strider lifted his head on his own before he moved closer. The weather cleared toward evening, leaving the yard blue-white and bright beneath a hard winter sky. Barrett clipped the soft temporary lead to Strider's collar and opened the back door. "Just the yard," he said. Strider stepped out cautiously. Snow brushed his paws. He sniffed the porch step, the woodpile, the base of the fence. For a few minutes, the world seemed small enough to manage. Then Strider stopped. His head turned toward the road before Barrett heard the engine. A black panel van rolled slowly past the end of the lane. No logo on the side, no delivery markings, just tinted windows, dark tires pressing wet tracks into the snow. Strider did not bark. That frightened Barrett more than a bark would have. The dog backed into him until his hindquarters pressed against Barrett's leg. Tremors ran through Strider's body, fine and constant, traveling up the leash into Barrett's hand. Barrett looked at the van. The van continued past the house, slowed near the corner, then disappeared beyond the line of winter bare maples. Strider remained pressed against him. Barrett laid one hand lightly over the dog's back, avoiding the neck. The joy of finding Strider was still real. It lived in the bowl on the floor, the sock by the hearth, the brief touch of a nose to his hand. But another truth stood beside it now, cold and patient. Someone had kept Strider alive for 6 years. Someone had given him other names, and very possibly someone had just learned he had come home. Barrett did not call Deputy Chief Silas Rowland Pierce until the house had gone quiet. Not peaceful, quiet. There was a difference he understood better now. Peace would have meant Strider asleep without watching the door. Peace would have meant the old dog did not lift his head every time a truck passed on the harbor road. Peace would have meant Barrett could walk from the kitchen to the living room without measuring each floorboard before putting weight on it. Quiet was only the absence of sound. Strider lay in the hallway with his chin on his paws. The soft green collar Elise had recommended resting loose around his neck. His eyes were open. They followed Barrett's hand as he picked up the phone from the kitchen counter. For most of the day, Barrett had resisted calling Silas. He told himself he was waiting for a better hour. He told himself he needed to collect his thoughts. He told himself a deputy chief should not be dragged into grief at night because one man had seen a scar behind a dog's ear. But the black van had driven past his house twice, once in the late afternoon, once again just after dusk. The second time, Strider had risen without a sound and backed into the narrow space between the couch and the wall, his body low, his breathing too fast. Barrett had stood at the window until the taillights disappeared beyond the boatyard. After that, waiting felt less like patience and more like negligence. Silas answered on the 5th ring. Pierce. The voice was older than Barrett remembered from the night of the memorial, but it still had the same weight, the kind that could calm a briefing room by refusing to rush. It's Barrett. A chair creaked on the other end. You all right? Barrett looked at Strider. The dog's ears had shifted toward the phone, not fully raised, but listening. I found him, Barrett said. Silas did not answer. The silence lasted long enough for the kitchen clock to sound too loud. Say that again, Silas said. Strider. I found Strider. Another silence. This one was different, not disbelief exactly. More like a door inside an old man had opened onto a room he had kept locked because he could not bear to clean it. Barrett, Silas said quietly, don't do this to yourself unless you're sure. I'm sure. He told him everything he could without letting the words collapse. Winter Harbor Animal Refuge. The German shepherd under the name Bruno, the scar behind the right ear, the head tilt, the way Strider answered to his name and ignored the temporary one, the damaged chip, the county custodial hold, the neck mark, the van. Silas did not interrupt. That, more than anything, told Barrett the deputy chief was taking the call seriously. When Barrett finished, Silas exhaled through his nose, slow and rough. The vest and collar were recovered in the collapse, he said. I know. We searched for days. I know. I signed the administrative presumption myself. I know that too. The words hung there, not accusing, not absolving. Barrett had been carrying them for 6 years. Silas had been carrying his own version. What do you need from me? Silas asked. Look again. I can't just open sealed North Haven files because of a phone call. I'm not asking you to cut a corner. Silas was quiet for a moment. Send what you have. Photos, medical notes. Anything documenting recognition. Elise hasn't finalized her report yet. Preliminary is enough to start asking the right people. I'll go through records, legal, and the federal liaison. Proper way. Barrett closed his eyes for half a second. Proper way. The phrase should have comforted him. Instead, it reminded him how many proper doors had failed to open when Strider had needed one. "I have a short video," Barrett said, "from Celia's yard, before Elise told me not to test him." "What kind of video?" Celia caught it on her phone. "I lifted my hand without thinking, the old wait signal," he responded. From the hallway, Strider blinked once as if the sound of that history had brushed him. "Send it," Silas said. Barrett sent the photographs first. The scar, the uneven saddle of black fur. The left rear leg held slightly out when Strider stood. Then the video Celia had sent him that afternoon. Barrett outside the fence, one hand half raised in a motion he had not meant to make, and the dog on the other side going still with painful obedience. He sent Elise's brief note after that. Then he set the phone face down. Strider watched the dark screen. "We did it right," Barrett said, though he was not sure whether he was speaking to the dog or to himself. Strider lowered his head. In the days that followed, the investigation did not move like television. It did not burst open with a dramatic call or a hidden file sliding across a desk. It moved in small official discomforts. Silas asked for access. Records asked why. Legal asked what standard of identification was being used. The federal liaison wanted a written request. Hollis sent over the custodial hold documents from the county. Each page scanned with the exacting neatness of someone who knew animals could be lost through sloppy paperwork as easily as through cruelty. Celia pulled the Vermont intake packet and left Barrett a voicemail that began with, "Before you get hopeful, this is mostly a mess," which was the closest she ever came to sounding frightened. While other people searched through forms and archives, Barrett tried to make his house less like a place where Strider had to stay alert. He opened interior doors before Strider reached them. He moved the metal fireplace tools into the closet. He taped a strip of cloth around the loose garage track so it would not rattle in the wind. He fed Strider at the same times each day. Soft food in the morning, softened kibble at night, medication hidden in a spoonful of wet food that Strider inspected as if it might be a legal document. Their walks became negotiations without words. On the first morning, Strider made it to the end of the lane. The harbor lay blue and cold beyond the road, and sunlight caught in the snow on the lobster traps stacked by the bait shop. Strider stood there for almost a full minute, nose lifted, taking in salt, diesel, gull feathers, and the far metallic knock of rigging against masts. Then he turned back. Barrett turned with him. On the second morning, Strider stopped at the mailbox and looked toward the house. "All right," Barrett said. They went home. On the third, he made it 3 houses farther and sniffed the frozen weeds along Mrs. Denholm's fence. Barrett felt absurdly proud and said nothing, because pride, too, could become pressure if placed in the wrong hands. Inside, Strider began collecting things. Not stealing exactly, collecting. A gray sock from the laundry pile, one of Barrett's wool gloves, a dish towel that had fallen from the counter. He carried each item to the rug near the hearth and arranged them without chewing. The first time Barrett laughed, Strider froze, every muscle waiting for consequence. Barrett turned his face toward the window, softened his voice, and let the sock stay. By the fourth day, there were 2 socks and 1 glove beside the fireplace. Barrett left them there. That small pile became the first evidence in the house that Strider was not only surviving it, he was beginning to alter it. On Friday evening, Silas called back. Barrett was standing at the sink, washing Strider's bowl with warm water long after it was clean. Strider lay near the hallway, watching the bowl more than Barrett. "I found something," Silas said. Barrett turned off the faucet. The house sharpened around him. What? Not the whole answer. Maybe not even a good answer, but something that should have been chased harder. Barrett gripped the edge of the counter. In a transport appendix from the week after North Haven, Silas continued. There's a note about one unidentified working dog removed from the outer harbor zone by a private rescue vessel, transferred for stabilization under emergency animal response contract. Barrett did not move. The name of the receiving facility is redacted in the old copy, Silas said, but the contract number ties to North Star Canine Solutions. The words sounded clean, Corporate. Almost harmless. North Star Canine Solutions. Barrett looked at Strider. The dog had lifted his head. No name? Barrett asked. No dog name, no handler, no unit number. Strider had a chip. If it was damaged, misread, or not scanned by the right system, it may have come back partial. That's not impossible. They found his vest and ID collar in the wreckage, which is why everyone believed he died there. Silas's voice tightened. Listen to me, Barrett. The first few days after North Haven were chaos. The blast cut the scene into 3 zones. We had injured firefighters, a missing federal tech, a compromised pier, water rescue, hazmat concerns. If Strider was thrown or dragged out toward an auxiliary dock, then picked up outside our perimeter. That explains days, Barrett said. Yes. Barrett looked at the soft green collar around Strider's neck, the damaged ring of fur beneath it. It doesn't explain 6 years. No, Silas said. It doesn't. Barrett wrote the contract number on the back of an envelope with a dull pencil because he could not find a pen. The letters looked too ordinary for what they had done to the room. After the call, he sat at the kitchen table until the light outside turned blue. Strider came slowly and placed one paw near his boot. Barrett lowered his hand. The dog touched his nose to Barrett's knuckles, then retreated to the hallway. It should have been enough to know how Strider had vanished from the search. But the knowledge only opened another absence, larger and colder than the first. The next morning, Celia and Hollis began pulling the Vermont records apart from opposite sides of the same problem. Celia worked from the shelter office, surrounded by barking dogs, outdated computers, and filing cabinets with labels that had been rewritten too many times. Hollis worked from the county animal control building, where every intake form received a case number before anyone was allowed to feel sentimental about it. They found that Strider had arrived at Winter Harbor under the temporary name Bruno after a multi-agency seizure at a Vermont training facility. The facility was not owned outright by North Star, but it had provided overflow kennel space and private handling services under contract. Before Bruno, the paperwork called him Tracker. Tracker had come from a transport list attached to a facility in Ohio. The Ohio record was thin, nearly careless. Estimated senior male German Shepherd. Prior working background suspected. Fearful but compliant. Rear leg stiffness. Chip unreadable. Celia read that line aloud over the phone and then went silent. Fearful but compliant. Barrett looked at Strider, who was standing by the back door because a gull had landed on the porch rail. "Keep going," he said. "I am," Celia replied, softer now. Elise found the next name. It came from a weathered medication code still visible on the plastic keeper of the temporary collar Strider had worn at intake. She called in the batch number through a professional veterinary network and waited most of a day for a return call. When she came to Barrett's house that evening, she did not sit right away. Snow had melted on the shoulders of her slate coat. Her medical bag hung from one hand. "He was treated in Pennsylvania," she said. Barrett opened the door wider. Elise stepped inside and looked toward Strider before continuing. A German Shepherd named Drake, approximate age listed as 7 at the time. Rear leg strain, stress-related weight loss, dehydration, and skin irritation around the neck. "Drake," Barrett repeated. Strider did not react. The name passed through the room like a stranger who had no right to stay. Elise placed a printed record on the table. She had highlighted only the necessary lines. Barrett appreciated that. Mercy, sometimes, was not making a person read more than they needed to in one sitting. "Transferred to private training facility," he read. Elise nodded. "Connected to North Star." Barrett sat down. Bruno, Tracker, Drake. 3 names placed over one life like labels, slapped onto boxes moving through warehouses. None of them were his. Strider stepped closer, not because of the papers, not because of the names, but because Barrett's breathing had changed. The dog stood beside him. Barrett did not touch the scar. He did not touch the collar. He placed his palm low, near Strider's shoulder, where contact could be accepted or refused. Strider leaned in just enough for warmth to pass between them. That was the moment Barrett understood. The cruelty had not only been in whatever had happened to Strider's body, it was in the erasure. Someone had taken a dog who knew his work, his handler, his house, his own name, and taught the world to call him something else, and until the paperwork made the lie look normal. By Monday afternoon, Detective Mallory Quinn Reese arrived at Barrett's house. She came in an unmarked state police vehicle, dusted white with road salt, wearing a charcoal parka, and carrying a brown leather shoulder bag that looked older than she was. She was in her late 30s, compact and sharp-eyed, with dark hair tied low at the nape of her neck and a left eyebrow that seemed permanently prepared to challenge the next sentence. Barrett met her on the porch. "You're Keating," she said. "You're Reese. I'm the person who's going to keep you from ruining your own case." Barrett looked at her. Mallory did not soften the statement. "You're emotionally involved. You're a witness. You're currently fostering the living center of the dispute. That means you do not investigate this yourself." "I'm a cop." "That's the problem, Sergeant." He might have disliked her if he had not immediately understood she was right. Inside, Mallory did not approach Strider. She looked once at the dog in the hallway, then set her bag on the table and began with documents. Celia's intake file, Hollis's custodial hold, Elise's preliminary report, the photographs of the scar, the video from the refuge yard, the transport appendix Silas had uncovered. Mallory read with a pen in hand, marking times, names, gaps, and chain of custody questions. She did not react dramatically to any one detail. Barrett watched her build the shape of the case without letting grief touch the evidence. Finally, she looked up. "North Star may have enough paper to make noise," she said. "Not enough to take the dog tonight, but enough to create a civil ownership fight if they move fast. They know where he is. You don't know that." Barrett looked toward the window. Mallory followed his gaze. "Tell me about the van." He did. She wrote it down, asked for approximate times, direction of travel, vehicle markings. Whether Strider reacted before or after Barrett noticed it. The questions were precise enough to irritate him and reassuring enough to keep him answering. Then Celia called. Mallory put the phone on speaker only after asking. Celia's voice carried the clipped restraint of someone trying not to scare the animals around her. A man called the refuge asking about the German Shepherd with the damaged chip. Mallory leaned closer. "Did he give a name?" "No, he didn't ask about adoption, didn't ask temperament, didn't ask medical status, just whether the dog was still on site or released to a foster. Number? Blocked. Anything else?" "One of my volunteers saw a black panel van in the lot 20 minutes later. It sat by the side fence and left." Mallory's eyebrow lifted slightly. Barrett did not move. By evening, Mallory had pulled the refuge camera footage. The image was grainy, broken by falling snow and the angle of the security light, but the rear plate was visible in 3 frames. The van belonged to a regional animal transport company. The company had an active contract with North Star Canine Solutions. Mallory came back to Barrett's house after dark. Strider was lying by the hallway entrance, head up, eyes on the front door. Barrett had not turned on the overhead light. The room was lit by one lamp and the blue reflection of snow outside. Mallory stood just inside the entryway and kept her voice low. "Here's what matters tonight," she said. "Strider is under county custodial hold. Hollis has authority. You have emergency medical foster permission. No one removes him without a court order or investigative authorization." Barrett nodded. "But," she continued, "North Star knows this dog is alive. They may believe they have paperwork tying him to them under one of the other names. If they make contact, you do not argue ownership on your porch. You call me, you call Hollis, you document." Strider shifted at the sound of her voice, then settled again. Mallory looked at him, not with pity, but with professional anger carefully kept behind her teeth. "What happened to him is not going to be proved by how he reacts," she said. "It's going to be proved by paperwork, records, people who signed what they shouldn't have signed, and people who were paid not to ask questions." Barrett looked down at Strider. For 6 years, he had thought the worst thing was not knowing where his dog had died. Now he understood there was something worse. Strider had lived, and somewhere in a file written by a stranger, His life had been renamed enough times that the truth itself would have to fight to be recognized. Detective Mallory Reese found Davis Trent through a mailing address that no longer received mail. The address belonged to a rental office in Portland that had closed 2 winters earlier. The phone number attached to the old personnel record led to a disconnected line. The emergency contact listed on his termination file claimed she had not spoken to him in 5 years, then called Mallory back 10 minutes later and asked whether Davis was in trouble or only finally telling someone the truth. That was how they found him. A former North Star logistics coordinator, 58 years old, no current employer listed in the animal handling industry, living above an old dispatch office outside Concord, New Hampshire. He had once filed an anonymous complaint about North Star's treatment records, then lost his position after the company narrowed the leak to 3 people. After that, he had stepped out of the profession as if leaving a room before someone could turn on the lights. Mallory did not tell Barrett right away. She called first to confirm the address. Then she contacted a local officer in New Hampshire and asked whether the site still had working cameras. Then she spoke with Hollis to make sure taking Strider out of Maine for a supervised identification meeting would not violate the county custodial hold. Only after those pieces were in place did she come to Barrett's house. Strider was by the back door when she arrived, his head lifted toward the sound of tires in the snow. Barrett opened the door before Mallory knocked. She stood on the porch in a charcoal parka, road salt whitening the hem, a paper cup of coffee untouched in one gloved hand. "I have a name," she said. Barrett looked past her at the unmarked state police vehicle. "Davis Trent?" Mallory's left eyebrow rose slightly. "Silas told you?" "Celia." She heard it from Hollis, who said it was not for distribution, which is how news travels fastest in Greyhaven. "That tracks." Mallory stepped inside but did not remove her coat. "He won't talk by phone. He says if the dog is real, he needs to see him." Barrett's jaw tightened. "The dog is not a prop. I agree, but you're asking me to bring him. I'm asking whether you think Strider can tolerate the drive if we do it carefully. If the answer is no, I tell Davis we need another way." Barrett looked at Strider. The dog was watching him, not Mallory. That had become one of the hardest parts. Strider did not understand evidence, warrants, custody agreements, or the difference between past and present when the wrong sound struck. He only understood Barrett's movement, Barrett's voice, Barrett's hesitation. "I don't want to put him through that," Barrett said. Mallory nodded. "Then don't. It should have been simple." The kindness of that answer made it more difficult. Barrett turned toward the laundry room, where the old K9 vest was no longer visible. He thought of the names printed in 3 different records: Bruno, Tracker, Drake. He thought of the black van outside his lane. He thought of Strider lowering his head when Elise's hand came near his neck, obedient to fear. "If Davis only talks after seeing him," Barrett said, "then Strider may be the only reason he tells the truth." Mallory's voice stayed even. "That still doesn't make it Strider's responsibility." "No," Barrett said. "It makes it mine to decide whether the risk is worth asking." He crouched near the back door, not too close. "Strider." The dog's ears shifted. "Long ride," Barrett said. "Open door whenever you need it." It was not an answer Strider could give in words, but he stepped toward the leash hanging on the hook, the old brown leather one with the blue repair stitch, and touched it once with his nose. Barrett closed his eyes for a breath. "All right," Mallory said quietly. "We go by the rules." The rules were strict. Mallory would drive ahead in the unmarked car. Barrett would follow in his pickup with Strider in the back seat. No sirens, no pressure, no unnecessary stops at crowded places. A local officer would be posted at the truck lot before they arrived. Davis would not get into Barrett's vehicle. Davis would not touch Strider. Any evidence would be received by Mallory, documented on site, sealed, and later duplicated through forensic procedure. Barrett was allowed to listen. He was not allowed to promise Davis protection. He was not allowed to threaten him. Most of all, he was not allowed to become the investigation. The drive to New Hampshire took them through bright winter country that looked too clean for what they were carrying. Pine trees held snow in their branches. Roadside diners glowed warm behind frosted glass. On the highway, sunlight flashed off passing trailers, and each metallic snap of chain or loose gate made Strider lift his head. Barrett kept one hand low where the dog could see it. At a rest stop near the state line, Strider refused water but stood with his nose into the wind for nearly 5 minutes. Barrett did not rush him. Mallory waited beside her car, phone in hand, pretending not to watch. They reached the truck lot outside Concord in the early afternoon. It was not the kind of place where secrets felt dramatic. That made it worse. Rows of sleeping rigs stood under a pale sky. Diesel fumes lingered low over wet gravel. A chain-link fence rattled at the far end of the lot whenever the wind came across the open road. Above the old dispatch office, 2 narrow apartment windows were covered by yellowed blinds. Davis Trent opened the office door, only as far as the security chain allowed. He looked smaller than Barrett had expected. Not physically small, exactly. He was average height, narrow-shouldered, wearing a brown-gray flannel shirt beneath a canvas jacket, but shrunken by caution. His gray hair lay in uneven lines as if combed with fingers. A rough beard covered his jaw. His eyes moved from Barrett to Mallory to the pickup and stayed there. "You brought him," Davis said. Mallory held up her badge. "You asked to see the dog before speaking. You can see him through the vehicle window. You do not approach without permission." Davis gave a short laugh without humor. "I know how permission works now." Barrett said nothing. He walked to the pickup and opened the rear passenger door only partway. Strider was seated inside, head high, body tense but controlled. The dog's gaze moved across the lot, past the trucks, past the fence, then landed on Davis. Davis's face changed before he spoke. It was not surprise, it was recognition trying to survive shame. The older man stepped down one stair, then stopped. "Drake," he whispered. Strider's ears lowered. His body shifted backward until his shoulder pressed against Barrett's thigh. Barrett felt the pressure and stayed still. He did not correct Davis immediately, though every part of him wanted to drive the wrong name out of the air. Davis swallowed. "God. His name is Strider," Barrett said. Davis looked at him then. Really looked. His eyes reddened but did not spill over. "Maybe it was," he said, "before us." Barrett's hand tightened once around the leash. Mallory's voice cut cleanly through the moment. Inside, open room, cameras running. The dispatch office smelled of stale coffee, engine oil, damp cardboard, and old heat. A vending machine hummed against one wall. A large window looked out over the lot, giving Strider a clear view of the pickup outside. Barrett brought him in only after walking the room first and propping the interior office door open with a plastic crate. Strider chose the space near the main exit. Davis noticed and looked away. They sat at a metal desk scarred by years of clipboards and keys. Mallory placed a recorder between them after stating the date, time, location, and everyone present. Davis rubbed his palms against his jeans. "That dog came through after North Haven," he said. "Different channel than the usual municipal work. Emergency animal response contract. We were told he was unidentified, working background suspected, no reliable chip return, no handler attached." "Did you believe that?" Mallory asked. Davis looked at Strider. "I believed what kept the forms moving." The answer landed quietly. Barrett did not speak. Davis continued in pieces, as if each sentence had to be pulled from a place he had locked badly and never repaired. North Star had received Strider under a stabilization agreement. Their job should have been simple: medical holding, behavior assessment, and notification to relevant agencies if identification became possible. But Strider had known commands, more than commands. He had pattern discipline, perimeter sense, controlled search behavior, and the kind of handler focus that could not be trained in a few months. "Sterling saw value," Davis said. That was the phrase. Value. Mallory wrote that down. Rhett Mosley handled compliance then. He signed a no-claim certification after the hold period, said no agency had come forward. "Was that true?" Mallory asked. Davis stared at the desk. "I don't know. That's what I told myself for years, that I didn't know." Barrett's voice was low. "But you suspected." Davis nodded once. The paperwork was too clean in the wrong places, too vague in others, and there was a waiver attached from a rescue intermediary I'd never heard of. I flagged it once. Rhett told me I was mistaking emergency documentation for fraud. And Sterling? Mallory asked. Sterling didn't sign dirty pages if someone else could hold the pen. A truck gate slammed outside. Strider flinched and lowered his head. Barrett shifted just enough for the dog's shoulder to touch his leg. Davis saw the movement and stopped speaking until Strider breathed again. "That sound," Davis said. He hated that sound. Barrett looked at him. Davis's mouth tightened. Metal doors, chain latches. He'd go still, not wild. That made them think he was manageable. "Manageable," Barrett repeated. Davis closed his eyes. They renamed him Drake after the second evaluation. New chip, new file. Once the new file existed, the old uncertainty stopped mattering to them. For 6 years, Strider moved through places that sounded, in Davis's telling, almost interchangeable. A Pennsylvania assessment kennel, a fenced training yard outside Dayton, a private security site in western Vermont, warehouses, distribution yards. Industrial lots where the lights stayed on all night and dogs were praised for guarding property that had never loved them. The records called him Canine Asset. The handlers called him Drake. When he worked well, no one asked where he had come from. When he refused certain handlers, the notes changed. Reactive to male handler. Stress signs observed. Compliance inconsistent. Possible instability. When his rear leg got worse, Davis said, retirement would have raised questions. Medical costs, ownership chain, origin. So they moved him down instead of out. Down where? Mallory asked. Contract kennels. Overflow facilities. Places that didn't ask much if invoices cleared. Barrett stared at the table. The anger he expected did not arrive clean. It came tangled with images he did not want. Strider standing in a fenced yard while strangers, said Drake. Strider listening for Barrett's voice in rooms where no one knew it existed. Strider learning that his name would not save him because the world had stopped using it. Davis leaned back, then reached toward the inside pocket of his jacket. Mallory's hand lifted immediately, slow. He stopped. USB drive. That's all. Place it on the table. He obeyed. The drive was old black plastic wrapped in a folded paper napkin as if shame needed household packaging. I copied transport schedules, Davis said. Some emails, vet reports, 2 training videos. I kept it after I left. Why? Barrett asked. Davis looked at him, and for the first time there was no evasion in his face. Because I was a coward, not stupid. No one moved. I filed an anonymous complaint once. They narrowed it down fast. A coworker was ready to testify. Then North Star sent a legal letter claiming theft of proprietary records. He backed out. I had a mortgage then, a daughter in school. I told myself someone with more authority would come asking. Barrett's voice nearly failed him. You waited 6 years. Davis nodded. Yes, there was no defense after that. No speech about regret, no request to be understood. That restraint saved him from sounding clean. Mallory removed an evidence bag from her satchel, read the seal number aloud, and documented the drive. She did not plug it into any device. She labeled, sealed, initialed, and had Davis sign the receipt. Do you have a copy? She asked. One image on an old machine in the back, not connected to anything. I'll arrange for proper collection. Davis hesitated. There's one video I can show you from a duplicate file, not the original, just so you know what you're chasing. Mallory considered him. We do not transfer from your machine right now. The back office was colder. A desktop computer sat on a folding table beside boxes of dispatch logs no one had thrown away. Davis woke the machine, hands shaking. The video opened on a metal kennel corridor. Barrett knew before Strider reacted. The sound came first, a chain sliding through a latch. Strider, standing beside Barrett in the doorway, lowered his ears. On the screen, a younger but already thinner version of him stood behind a gate. Same uneven black saddle, same pale mark on the chest, same rightward head tilt when an unseen handler raised a hand. The man off-screen said, Drake, hold. The dog obeyed. Barrett stopped breathing. The handler gave another signal. It was Barrett's signal, not similar, his. The one he had built into Strider over years of quiet repetitions, Early mornings, rain-soaked parking lots, winter drills, trust layered over trust until hand and dog moved like two parts of the same thought. On the screen, Strider obeyed a stranger using it, then he looked past the camera. For one bare second, the dog in the video seemed not to be looking at the handler at all, but waiting for a different voice to correct the world. Barrett stepped back. Strider pressed against his leg, not looking at the screen anymore. Davis whispered, "I turned the radio up some nights when he howled. I turned it up so I wouldn't have to know." Barrett did not answer. He wanted anger large enough to fill the room. He wanted to throw the old computer through the window, to tell Davis that shame after the fact was not a rescue. But Strider was shaking against him, and rage would only make the room another place where the dog had to brace. So Barrett lowered his hand to Strider's shoulder. Not the neck, the shoulder. "We're done," Mallory said. Her voice left no room for argument. They stepped back into the daylight. Outside, the truck lot looked exactly as it had before. Rigs parked in rows, vapor drifting from exhaust pipes, snow-packed gray under tires. The world had a cruel talent for remaining ordinary after it revealed something unforgivable. Davis stood near the office door with his hands empty. "I'm sorry," he said. Barrett looked at him. The words were not enough. Davis seemed to know that. "I'll testify," he added, "if they ask. If it matters," Mallory answered before Barrett could. "It matters if you tell the truth and don't make yourself the center of it." Davis nodded, accepting the sentence like a deserved weight. On the drive back to Maine, Strider slept. Not peacefully, but deeply enough that his head lowered near the seatbelt buckle and his breathing grew heavier. Barrett glanced at him in the rearview mirror more than he watched the road. Mallory's unmarked car stayed ahead of them, steady and patient through the winter traffic. For almost an hour, the dog did not wake. Then a semi passed on the left, and one of its chains snapped hard against metal. Strider jerked upright. His paws scrambled once against the seat. His eyes went wide, searching for the kennel corridor that was no longer there. Barrett took the next exit. He pulled into a rest area half covered in snow and parked at the far end away from the trucks. Mallory stopped 2 spaces ahead, but did not get out immediately. Barrett opened the rear door. Cold air entered the cab. Strider did not jump down. He stood there, shaking, looking from the seat to the open sky. Barrett sat on the snowy curb beside the truck. No command, no coaxing, no demand that the dog understand they had escaped the video, the office, the name Drake, all of it. After a while, Strider stepped down. His stiff hind leg slipped once, then steadied. He came to Barrett and stood close. They sat there until the shaking eased. Snow gathered on Barrett's sleeves. Mallory watched from her car and gave him the dignity of not being observed too closely. By the time they reached Greyhaven, evening had turned the harbor road blue. The old boatyard was dark except for one security light swinging in the wind. Barrett's house appeared at the end of the lane, porch lamp glowing warm against the snow. For a few seconds, home looked possible. Then Barrett saw the black panel van parked at the curb, engine running, no logo, dark windows. Strider rose in the back seat before Barrett touched the brake. This time, the dog did not make a sound. For a moment, Barrett did not move. The black panel van sat at the curb with its engine running, exhaust drifting white into the winter dusk. It was parked too neatly to be lost, too patiently to be passing through. No company logo marked the side. Snow gathered along the windshield wipers and melted in slow lines down the glass. Strider stood in the back seat before the truck had fully stopped. He did not bark. That silence told Barrett more than a warning would have. The dog's ears flattened, then lifted halfway, then flattened again, as if 2 instincts were fighting inside the same tired body. The old canine in him knew how to stand between danger and the handler. The wounded animal in him remembered what happened when black vans opened their doors. Barrett put the truck in park and kept both hands visible on the wheel for a second longer than necessary. "Stay with me," he said softly. "Not a command. A promise, or as close as he could make one." Mallory's unmarked car rolled in behind him. Her headlights swept across the van, Then, across the three people standing near Barrett's porch and the two uniformed animal transport workers by the curb. Mallory did not get out immediately. She watched first. Barrett appreciated that. A person who watched before acting was less likely to make a bad moment worse. The man at the foot of the porch steps looked exactly like someone who had never needed to raise his voice. He was tall, cleanly dressed in a charcoal overcoat, black leather gloves, and a pale gray scarf folded with careful precision. His hair was blonde gray, brushed back smooth from a narrow face. Even in the cold, nothing about him seemed hurried. He held a black document case against one side, as if it were less an object than an extension of his authority. Beside him stood a woman in a dark wool coat, with a legal pad tucked under one arm. She had the still posture of an attorney paid to turn emotion into procedure. A third person, a contract veterinarian by the look of the insulated medical bag at his feet, kept his gaze mostly on the van rather than the house. Barrett opened the rear door of his truck. Strider did not climb out until Barrett stepped aside. The dog's paws touched the snow carefully. His left rear leg lagged half a beat. When his eyes found the people near the porch, his body drew inward. He moved behind Barrett's left leg, not hiding exactly, but placing Barrett between himself and the van. Mallory got out of her car. "Sergeant Keating," she said, voice calm enough to make the driveway feel smaller. The man in the charcoal coat turned. "Detective Reese," he said. "Good, that saves a phone call." Mallory's expression did not change. "You know who I am. I know who's been asking questions." He looked past her to Barrett. "Mr. Keating." "Sergeant," Barrett said. A slight smile touched the man's mouth. "Sterling Crane, North Star Canine Solutions." Strider's breath changed. Barrett felt it through the leash. Sterling glanced down at the dog. Not long, not with fear, with assessment, as if he were confirming the condition of a returned vehicle. "That is Drake," he said. Barrett kept his hand open at his side, where Strider could see it. "His name is Strider." The attorney made a note. Sterling opened his document case. "According to our records, the animal currently in your possession was lawfully transferred into North Star's care under an emergency stabilization contract 6 years ago. He was later declared unclaimed, treated, microchipped, and assigned to a private working dog program under the name Drake. We have maintained care, training, and records for him since that time." "No," Barrett said. The word came too fast. Mallory looked at him once, not sharply. "Enough." Barrett swallowed the rest. Sterling did not miss it. "I understand this is emotional. You don't understand anything about him. I understand documentation." Sterling removed a folder and held it toward Mallory, not Barrett. "We are requesting temporary transfer to a neutral veterinary holding facility while ownership is clarified. We have brought transport staff and a veterinarian to ensure the process is humane." The two transport workers by the van shifted as if their names had been called. They wore clean gray jackets, heavy gloves, and the uncomfortable look of people who had expected a routine pickup, not police, snow, and a trembling German shepherd. Barrett did not reach for his weapon. He did not step forward. He did not use his badge like a wall. Every part of him wanted to say mine, but the word would not help Strider. Before Mallory could answer, a county SUV turned into the lane. Hollis May Renner stepped out wearing her forest green parka and burnt orange knit cap, a yellow folder tucked under one arm. Snow blew around her boots as she walked up the driveway with the brisk irritation of someone whose evening had been interrupted by people misunderstanding jurisdiction. "Who authorized animal removal from this property?" Hollis asked. Sterling's attorney turned toward her. "And you are?" "Hollis Renner, County Animal Control Director. The German Shepherd is under county custodial hold following a multi-agency seizure. Emergency medical foster was granted to Sergeant Keating. No transfer, surrender, or transport occurs without county authorization or a court order." The attorney's pen paused. Sterling's smile thinned. "We are prepared to provide proof of ownership." "You can provide it to Detective Reese," Hollis said. "Not to my transport lane, not to his porch, and not with a van idling outside a foster placement." Barrett looked down. Strider's shoulder was pressed so hard against his leg that he could feel the tremor through his uniform pants. Mallory accepted the folder from Sterling and did not open it immediately. She read the cover page first. Barrett saw the name printed in bold letters. Drake, Canine Asset Return Request. The phrase seemed to tilt the driveway under him. Not dog, not canine, not Strider. Asset. 6 years of paperwork had learned to say the cruelty politely. Mallory's voice remained flat. This request is noted. It does not authorize removal tonight. Sterling looked toward Barrett for the first time with something colder than politeness. You are a law enforcement officer, he said. You know better than most people that personal attachment does not override records. Barrett's jaw tightened. Strider lifted his head at the change in him. That small movement stopped Barrett from answering with anger. The dog had learned too well what anger in a human body could mean. Barrett would not make him read that language from his own handler. I know records can be wrong, Barrett said. Sterling adjusted one black glove. Then you should welcome a neutral review. Another vehicle pulled in behind Hollis. Celia Morgan Harlow climbed out with a banker's box held against her coat, her red wine parka bright against the snow. She had not bothered with a hat, and the loose silver strand at her temple whipped across her face as she came up the drive. You picked a funny hour for neutral, she said. Behind her, Dr. Elise Monahan parked close to the curb and stepped out with a flat medical case. She did not look at Sterling first. Her eyes went to Strider, reading his body before she read the scene. Mallory took control before the driveway could become a crowd. Everyone stays where they are. Documents only. No one approaches the dog. Sterling's attorney opened her mouth, then closed it after one look at Mallory's badge. Celia placed the shelter intake file on the hood of Barrett's truck. Vermont seizure transfer, damaged chip record, temporary name Bruno, county hold attached. Elise set down her case and opened a folder of her own. Preliminary exam, photographs, radiographs, and treatment recommendations. My conclusions are medical, not criminal. Neck pattern is consistent with prolonged pressure from equipment. Rear leg degeneration and muscle fatigue are consistent with extended work past reasonable rest. Sterling's contract veterinarian looked uncomfortable. Elise turned to him. You're welcome to review them from where you stand. Barrett almost smiled, but Strider shifted again. Mallory's phone buzzed. She checked the screen, then answered on speaker only after stepping slightly away from Sterling. Reese. Silas Pierce's voice came through, rough and controlled. I'm sending the confirmation now. Greyhaven PD records show Strider, K9 unit number G17, assigned to Sergeant Barrett Keating at the time of North Haven. Status under review, prior administrative presumption of death pending correction. Mallory said, received. A moment later, her phone chimed with the document. Sterling's eyes moved to the device. The driveway held its breath. The legal shape of the night had changed. Not enough to end anything. Enough to prevent Sterling from pretending Barrett was merely a grieving man with an old dog he wanted to keep. Sterling looked at Strider again. I would like our veterinarian to scan the current chip. No, Hollis said. His attorney spoke this time. A scan is non-invasive. A scan requires approaching an animal in distress, Elise replied, and the dog has documented sensitivity around the neck and shoulders. Sterling's eyes narrowed slightly. Drake was always manageable with firm handling. Strider growled. It was low, controlled, and brief. The sound did not fill the driveway. It changed it. The transport workers looked at each other. The contract veterinarian took one step back. Sterling did not move, but the hand holding his papers tightened. Barrett did not pull Strider away. He also did not let the dog move forward. He simply shifted his body, placing himself more fully between Strider and Sterling. He is not evidence you can provoke, Mallory said. I did not provoke him. You called him by the wrong name and described firm handling after being informed of trauma markers. That's enough. Sterling's expression cooled into something almost blank. For the first time, Barrett saw not rage in him, not even cruelty in the ordinary sense. Sterling did not look like a man who enjoyed pain. He looked like a man annoyed that pain had become relevant to paperwork. Mallory opened her satchel and removed a sealed evidence bag. Inside was the duplicate receipt for Davis Trent's USB, the actual drive already secured elsewhere for forensic processing. She did not wave it around. She did not need to. Sterling saw the label. His eyes paused on Davis's name. It lasted less than a second. Barrett saw it anyway, so did Mallory. "That," Mallory said, "is why any ownership claim you file will be reviewed alongside an active investigation." Sterling recovered quickly. Men like him did not survive by staying visibly startled. "Our company will cooperate with lawful requests," he said. "Good," Mallory replied. "Then you'll leave tonight and submit through counsel." The attorney touched Sterling's sleeve. A small gesture, practical. "Retreat now, argue later." Sterling closed the folder. "Sergeant Keating," he said, "keeping the dog here may feel merciful, but emotion can complicate recovery." Barrett looked at Strider, then back at him. "Recovery from what?" Sterling's answer came too smoothly. "Confusion." For the first time that night, Barrett smiled. There was no warmth in it. "No," he said. "He knows exactly who he is." No one spoke after that. Sterling turned and walked to the van. His attorney followed. The contract veterinarian avoided Elise's eyes. The two transport workers opened the rear doors, then closed them again without loading anything. The van pulled away under the watch of a local cruiser that had arrived quietly at the end of the lane. Its taillights disappeared beyond the boatyard. Only after the sound of the engine faded did Strider's legs begin to give. Barrett crouched beside him, careful and slow. "I've got you." This time, Strider leaned into him. Not fully. Enough. Celia exhaled like she had been holding the same breath for 20 minutes. Hollis tucked her folder beneath her arm and looked at Barrett with a sternness that did not hide concern. "He stays under county hold," she said. "Nothing changes tonight. I know. If anyone contacts you, you call Detective Reese. You do not debate paperwork at the door." "I know," Mallory added, "and you do not call Sterling." Barrett glanced at her. Her eyebrow lifted. "I've met men with your jawline before. They call. I won't." "Good. Surprise me." Elise knelt near Strider, only after he turned his head toward her. "Inside," she said softly. "Warm room. No visitors after this." Barrett nodded. They helped only by giving space. That was the strange mercy of the people gathered in his snowy driveway. No one rushed to touch the dog. No one made the reunion public. No one said Strider was safe, as if the word could create safety by itself. One by one they left. Celia took her banker's box back to the refuge. Hollis returned to the county SUV. Mallory stayed long enough to copy the plate numbers of every vehicle, then told Barrett she would call in the morning after speaking with the prosecutor. Elise was the last to go. At the door, she looked toward the garage where the old K9 vest had been moved out of sight. "You did well tonight," she said. Barrett almost rejected the praise. Then he realized she was not praising him for winning. She was praising him for not making Strider survive his anger too. "Did I?" he asked. "You stood between him and the past," Elise said. "You didn't throw him back into it." After she left, the house settled into darkness. Barrett did not turn on the television. He did not open the North Star folder Mallory had photographed and left summarized in careful notes. He did not call Silas, though he wanted to hear another human voice confirm that Sterling had not taken the dog. He sat in the living room with one lamp off and the other dimmed low. Strider stood in the hallway for a long time. Then, slowly, he came forward. His steps were uneven. His head was low. He stopped once when the house clicked in the cold, then continued until he reached Barrett's chair. Barrett lowered his hand. Strider did not touch it. Instead, he placed his head on Barrett's knee and exhaled. The breath was long, tired, and deep enough to sound like something leaving. Barrett rested his palm on the dog's shoulder, avoiding the collar, the neck, the places where human hands had taught the wrong lessons. The night outside looked peaceful through the window. Snow softened the tire tracks where the van had been. By morning, the driveway might look untouched. That was the danger of snow. It made evidence look gentle. Barrett understood now that keeping Strider in the house was not the same as saving him. Love had opened the door. It had put water in the bowl. It had given the dog a place to lean. But love would not be enough to defeat 6 years of polished documents. If North Star had built a lie through forms, signatures, contracts, and names, then the truth would have to travel the same hard road back. Barrett looked down at Strider. "Then we do it right," he whispered. The dog's eyes closed for the first time that evening. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the place where the van had waited. The morning after Sterling Crane left Barrett's driveway, the snow covered every tire mark. By 7, the road looked clean. Barrett stood at the kitchen window with a mug of coffee cooling in his hand and hated that small mercy. Snow softened everything. It filled the grooves where the van had waited. It hid the places where transport workers had stood. It made the previous night seem less real, as if the house had not held its breath while men with folders tried to turn Strider back into Drake. Strider lay beneath the kitchen table, awake but quieter than he had been before. His chin rested near Barrett's boot. Not on it, near it. That was how progress worked with him, never dramatic enough for celebration, never small enough to ignore. Mallory called at 8. "The forensic copy is clean," she said. Barrett set the mug down. "Clean how?" "Initial review shows the USB data hasn't been modified since Davis left North Star. File dates, metadata, email headers, internal record numbers. They line up with what we've pulled from outside sources. That means it's usable. It means it's a door," Mallory corrected. "Not the whole house." Barrett almost smiled despite himself. "You always talk like that? When men are trying to sprint into federal cases, yes." She told him the next steps without dressing them up. The USB would not convict anyone by itself. Investigators would need server records, contract files, veterinary invoices, chain of transfer documents, and sworn statements. Because the case crossed state lines and involved dogs originally tied to public agencies, Mallory had already contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office. By noon, Barrett had a new name in his phone. Assistant U.S. Attorney Camille Arden North did not sound like a woman interested in dramatic outrage. Her voice was calm, warm at the edges, and too precise to waste a syllable. When she introduced herself, Barrett pictured a courtroom full of people learning that quiet did not mean gentle. "I understand Strider is in your care," Camille said. "He's under county hold, emergency medical foster." "Good. Keep using that language. It matters." Barrett looked down at Strider. The dog's eyes were half closed, but one ear had turned toward the phone. Camille continued, "Detective Reese has explained your relationship to the dog. I need you to understand something from the start, Sergeant. Your story matters. His service matters. But this case will not survive on grief. I know. Do you?" The question was not cruel. That made it harder. Barrett did not answer immediately. Camille gave him the space to be honest. "I'm learning," he said. "Then learn this too. If North Star built a false chain through forms, signatures, and contracts, we dismantle it through forms, signatures, and contracts. The truth has to be able to stand in a room where no one has met Strider." After the call ended, Barrett remained beside the counter for a long time. The truth has to stand where no one has met Strider. He looked at the old German shepherd beneath the table. Strider's body bore the history, but his trembling could not be evidence. His fear could not sign affidavits. His scar could open questions, but records had to answer them. Over the next 2 weeks, the house became both refuge and waiting room. Mallory came twice, never staying longer than necessary. She collected corrected statements, verified dates, and asked Barrett the same questions in different ways until the answers stayed firm. Camille appeared once on a video call, a woman with natural black curls cut to her shoulders, a silver streak near her right temple, and a red-brown file bag visible behind her chair. She did not ask Barrett to perform his pain. She asked him for times, names, who stood where, which agency held what authority, and what he personally knew versus what he believed. That distinction bruised more than he expected. What he knew: Strider had belonged to Greyhaven PD. Strider had vanished after North Haven. Strider had recognized his name, his handler, and old signals. North Star records had used other names. What he believed: Strider had waited for him. What he feared: Strider had stopped waiting because waiting had hurt too much. Those last two did not go into the affidavit. Davis Trent gave his formal statement in a state police interview room 3 days after the driveway confrontation. Mallory offered Barrett the option not to read it. He read it anyway. Davis admitted he had suspected the no-claim certification was wrong. He admitted he had seen the name Drake attached to a dog with old police-level training. He admitted he had heard Strider howling in metal kennels and chosen to turn up the radio. He did not ask for forgiveness anywhere in the statement. Barrett read that part twice. He respected it more than he wanted to. Silas came to the house the following Friday. He did not arrive in uniform. He wore a dark civilian coat and carried a folder under one arm. His white mustache looked freshly trimmed, but the rest of him looked older than the last time Barrett had seen him in person. He stood on the porch until Barrett opened the door, and even then he did not step inside right away. "May I?" he asked. Barrett looked back at Strider. The dog was in the hallway, head lifted, watching the visitor. His body did not fold. He did not growl. He simply observed the older man with the weary seriousness of an animal who had learned that recognition did not always mean safety. "Come in," Barrett said. Silas entered slowly. He stopped near the kitchen, far enough from Strider that the dog did not have to decide anything. "I signed the administrative presumption," Silas said. "No greeting, no weather, no soft road into the wound." Barrett closed the door. "I know. We had injured officers. Federal people breathing down the department's neck, reporters outside the station, families wanting answers. You were in the hospital asking for a dog none of us could find." His voice roughened, but he did not stop. "I told myself we had done everything possible. Maybe we had in the first days. But when that transport appendix came in, someone should have pushed. I should have pushed." Barrett looked toward the table where Strider's bowl sat clean and waiting for evening. "You didn't give him to North Star." "No," Silas said, "but I helped close the file. There it was, not guilt pretending to be nobility, not apology as theater, just a fact large enough to stand between them." Barrett wanted to say something that would release both of them. He did not. Strider rose and took 2 slow steps forward. Silas's eyes went to him. "I'm sorry, boy." Strider stopped. The name boy did not harm him. It did not belong to the stolen list, Bruno, Tracker, Drake. It was only an old man speaking to an old dog with regret in his hands. Strider lowered his head, then turned away and returned to the hallway. Silas accepted that as more than he deserved. After he left, Barrett found himself in the garage. He had gone there for firewood. That was what he told himself. But the ladder was already under his hands before he admitted the truth. The storage bin sat on the highest shelf where he had placed it after Elise's warning. He pulled it down carefully, set it on the workbench, and unclipped the lid. The K9 vest lay folded inside. Black fabric, faded patch, a torn strap repaired after a winter search years before. Mud stains along one edge that had never fully washed out. Barrett touched the patch with 2 fingers. He did not plan to put it on Strider. He told himself that. He only wanted to see it, to remember the dog who had worn it with pride, to prove, maybe, that not every piece of their work together had been stolen. Strider appeared in the garage doorway. Barrett had not heard him come. The dog looked at the vest. His body changed, not fear like the van, not collapse like the garage door, something quieter and worse. Strider stepped backward once and went still, head low, eyes fixed on the black fabric as if waiting to learn what version of his life Barrett wanted from him. Barrett understood then. He had said he did not need Strider to prove anything, but grief was clever. It found innocent disguises, a memory, a folded vest, a chance to touch what used to be. Barrett closed the bin. "I'm sorry," he said. Strider did not move. Barrett carried the bin past him, through the kitchen, out the back door, and into the small shed behind the house. He placed it on a shelf beneath a tarp, not hidden in shame, not displayed like a shrine. When he came back inside, Strider was lying beside the hearth. The gray sock and 1 wool glove were arranged near his front paws. Barrett did not laugh. He sat in the chair and let the fire burn low. The investigation widened. Camille obtained a preservation order for North Star's records, then warrants for specific facilities tied to the transport chain. Investigators found more than Strider's file. They found repeated no-claim certifications signed by Rhett Mosley, each one vague in the same polished way. They found internal emails where Sterling Crane referred to dogs as recoverable assets, unattached working inventory, and high-value transfers. Rhett had died 2 years earlier, which meant he could not be questioned. But the emails had not died with him. One thread showed Sterling asking whether municipal origin complications had been resolved before one dog was transferred to private security work. Another showed a veterinary recommendation that Drake, Strider, be retired from active handling due to hind leg deterioration. Sterling's response was 7 words: "Hold retirement until ownership chain is quiet." Barrett read that line in Mallory's office because she would not forward it to his phone. He was grateful for that later. At the time, he placed both hands on the table and stared until the words lost shape. Mallory waited. She had learned when not to speak. That was him, Barrett said. Yes, he knew. Enough to ask the wrong question. A week later, federal agents and state investigators executed search warrants at 2 North Star sites and 1 contracted kennel. They did not find a hidden dungeon or the clean satisfaction of evil labeled clearly. They found something more ordinary and therefore more frightening: mismatched chip logs, deleted folders, altered intake forms, invoices for dogs moved under changing names, and medical recommendations filed but ignored. An IT employee named Noah Pell, thin and nervous in a blue company polo, told investigators Sterling had ordered several folders purged after learning that the German Shepherd called Drake had surfaced in Maine. Noah had not completed the deletion. He had saved screenshots of the instruction because, in his words, "I knew the request smelled like prison." The off-site backups filled in what North Star thought it had erased. Sterling was arrested on a gray Tuesday morning, not in a dramatic chase, not in front of Barrett's house. He was taken into custody outside a glass office building while holding a stainless steel travel mug and wearing the same kind of controlled expression he had brought to the snowy driveway. The charges were initial, Camille reminded everyone: filing false records, obstruction, conspiracy to misappropriate public property, contract fraud. More could come, some might not stick. Investigations were not stories. They did not owe anyone clean endings. Barrett received the call while rinsing Strider's bowl. Water ran over steel, bright and ordinary. Silas was the one who told him. They arrested Crane. Barrett turned the faucet off. Strider was on the kitchen rug, ears relaxed for once, eyes on the bowl. "What happens now?" Barrett asked. "Now Camille builds what she can prove. North Star is suspended from several active contracts. More records are coming." Barrett looked out the window toward the harbor road, where fresh snow had begun to fall. "How many dogs?" Silas did not answer right away. That silence was answer enough to change the room. "We don't know yet," he said, "but not one." Strider rose slowly and came to Barrett's side. Barrett put his wet hand on the dog's shoulder and let the water darken the fur. The relief he expected did not come as relief. It came as exhaustion, then as anger, then as something wider than both. For 6 years he had imagined Strider as the missing center of his own grief. Now Strider had become a door into a hallway of other names, other files, other dogs moved through paperwork until their histories blurred. The case did not end with him, but for Strider, one part of it finally did. Several weeks later, the corrected status arrived through official channels. Barrett did not open the envelope immediately. It sat on the kitchen table while Strider slept beneath it, tucked into the shadow near Barrett's chair. Outside, the harbor was bright under late winter sun. A gull stood on the porch rail and looked offended by the cold. Barrett made coffee, poured it out, sat down, opened the envelope. The document was plain: city letterhead, case number, date, signatures from Greyhaven PD, County Animal Control, and the Municipal Legal Office. Former status: missing following critical incident, administratively presumed killed in line of duty. Corrected status: located, identity verified, recovered to agency authority. The next page carried Elise's formal retirement evaluation. Strider was no longer fit for duty. The wording hurt and healed at the same time. Not fit for duty meant no one could ask him to patrol a warehouse again. No one could use his obedience as proof that he should keep working. No one could turn his loyalty into labor. The final page was the transfer. For $1 and lifetime medical care responsibility, ownership of retired K9 Strider transferred to Sergeant Barrett Von Keating. Hollis's signature sat near the bottom, blue ink neat and uncompromising. Barrett read the page once, then again. Then a third time, slower. Strider shifted beneath the table and placed his muzzle across Barrett's boot. Barrett lowered one hand, the dog's eyes closed. For 6 years, Strider had carried the truth in his body when no file would carry it for him. Now, at last, the paperwork had learned his name. Winter Harbor Animal Refuge did not put up a banner. Celia had been very clear about that. No balloons, she told Evan that Saturday morning, standing beneath the porch overhang with a clipboard tucked against her chest. No speaker system, no news vans. If anyone tries to make this look like a parade, I'll assign them to kennel drains until spring. Evan, who was holding a stack of folding chairs with his chin in both arms, nodded as if kennel drains were a fate he took seriously. Snow fell lightly over the refuge, soft enough to remain beautiful, steady enough to blur the tree line beyond the yard. It settled on the roof, the fence rails, the hoods of parked cars, and the old paw print sign by the driveway. The morning was bright in the way Maine winter could be bright after weeks of hard weather. Cold blue shadows, white ground, pale sunlight on every icy edge. Barrett arrived 10 minutes early. Strider sat in the back seat watching the building through the window. He no longer shook when the truck stopped at the refuge, not every time. That was a difference Barrett had learned not to announce. Some changes stayed safest when no one pointed at them. "You ready?" Barrett asked. Strider turned his head toward him. The old German shepherd's muzzle was silver in the light. The black saddle across his back had grown rougher with age and recovery, and his left rear leg still stiffened when the cold worked its way into the joints. He wore the soft chestnut leather collar Barrett had chosen after the city transfer went through. No metal chain, no working harness, nothing that asked his body to become younger than it was. Barrett opened the door and waited. Strider stepped down slowly, one paw at a time, then paused with his nose lifted toward the snow. 6 years ago, Barrett would have given a command without thinking. Now he waited until Strider chose the direction. The dog turned toward the porch. Celia stood there in her red wine parka, silver-brown hair tied low, a loose strand already blown across one cheek. Her eyes moved to Strider first, then to Barrett. There was no pity in her expression. Only the serious warmth of someone who had seen many animals come through doors under the wrong names and knew how rare it was for one to leave under the right one. "You made it," she said. Barrett looked at the row of folding chairs beneath the overhang. Fewer than 20. Shelter staff, Hollis from County Animal Control, Elise with a small flat case in one hand, Mallory near the side rail, hands in her coat pockets. Deputy Chief Silas Pierce standing slightly apart, his hat held against his chest. Davis Trent was near the bottom step. He had come in a dark brown coat and no confidence. His gray cap was pulled low, and both hands stayed visible at his sides, as if he had decided that making himself small was the only honest thing left to do. When Strider noticed him, the dog stopped. The porch grew quieter. Davis did not move closer. Barrett felt the leash grow still in his hand. Strider looked at Davis for a long moment. No growl, no recoil, no step forward either. The dog simply looked, measuring a man who had once turned up the radio because the truth had been too loud. Davis lowered his eyes first. Strider turned away and pressed his shoulder lightly against Barrett's knee. The moment passed without forgiveness. That made it feel true. Celia cleared her throat, though her voice was steady when she began. "We're not here for ceremony," she said. "Not really. Strider doesn't need one. Dogs don't ask us to make speeches when we finally do what we should have done in the first place." A small breath moved through the gathered people, almost laughter, almost pain. Celia looked down at the page on her clipboard. We are here to recognize the corrected record of K9 Strider, formerly assigned to Sergeant Barrett Keating of the Greyhaven Police Department, Unit Number G17, missing following the North Haven incident, administratively presumed killed in the line of duty. Located, identity verified, recovered to agency authority, and officially retired. Her voice shook once on the last word. She steadied it before anyone could help. Ownership has been transferred to Sergeant Keating, medical care responsibility accepted. County custodial hold closed. Hollis nodded once, firm and official, even with snow gathering on her orange knit cap. Elise stepped forward next. She did not wear a white coat. She wore a gray wool coat over a plum sweater and carried a small black box, the kind that might hold a watch or a medal. When she opened it, Barrett saw the tag inside, brushed silver, plain, no decorative paw print, no heroic slogan. Just the truth, clean enough to hold. Strider, retired police. K9. Barrett felt his throat tighten. He had worn a badge for most of his adult life. He knew how metal could lie when people hid behind it. He also knew how it could carry meaning when someone finally used it to name a thing correctly. Elise held the tag out to him. He doesn't owe anyone a pose, she said softly. Barrett nodded. He knelt in front of Strider, moving slowly enough that the dog could follow every motion. Snow dampened one knee of his uniform trousers. He held the tag in his palm for a moment, letting Strider sniff it. The dog touched it with his nose. Then Barrett fastened it to the collar. The ring clicked. Strider flinched once at the small metal sound, then looked at Barrett instead of retreating. Barrett stayed still. The tag settled against the leather. For several seconds, no one clapped. No one wanted to turn the moment into noise before Strider had decided what it meant. Then Evan, standing behind the chairs, pressed one hand gently against the other. A soft clap, almost embarrassed by itself. Celia joined, then Hollis, then Mallory. The applause remained quiet, scattered, careful. From inside the kennel wing, one of the young dogs barked sharply, offended by joy arriving without explanation. Strider turned his head toward the sound, studied the door, then slowly lowered himself onto the porch boards with the long patience of an old officer who had decided the puppy would understand someday. Barrett laughed under his breath. Strider did not startle. That was when Barrett nearly came apart. Not when the tag was fastened. Not when Celia read the corrected record. Not when Sterling Crane's name had begun moving through charging documents and legal calendars. It was that small thing. A laugh allowed to exist. A dog hearing happiness and not bracing for punishment. After the gathering, people lingered in the shelterway that avoided saying goodbye too quickly. Hollis handed Barrett a copy of the closed custodial order in a yellow folder and reminded him, as if the entire county depended on it, that Strider's arthritis medication was not optional. Mallory told him the North Star investigation was still active and would be for some time. There were other dogs, other names, other agencies being contacted. Camille was building what could be proven. Barrett listened, grateful that Mallory did not offer a final answer where there wasn't one. Silas approached last. He stood near the porch rail, hat in both hands. Strider watched him without rising. "May I say goodbye?" Silas asked Barrett. Barrett looked down at Strider. The dog's eyes were open, calm, but alert. "From there," Barrett said. Silas accepted the boundary. "Goodbye, Strider," he said. Then, after a pause, "and welcome home." Strider blinked. For Silas, it was enough. Davis remained at the steps until most people had moved inside for coffee. He did not speak to Barrett. He did not ask to touch Strider. He did not repeat the apology he had already given, as if repetition could turn it into payment. He only looked once at the silver tag, and then at the snow beneath his boots. Barrett understood something then. Some people did not deserve to be forgiven in the moment they finally told the truth, but maybe the truth still needed them to tell it. Davis left quietly. Strider did not watch him go. The old leash changed places that afternoon. For 6 years it had lived under tarps, in storage bins, on garage shelves, always close enough to prove Barrett had not forgotten and hidden enough to let him survive the day. Now it hung on the hook beside the back door where a leash belonged. The leather was worn brown-red at the handle. The blue repair stitch stood out plainly in daylight. Barrett replaced the old metal clasp with a quieter one, but he kept the scarred handle as it was. The next morning he used it. Snow had stopped overnight, leaving the harbor road clean and bright under a pale sun. Strider stood still while Barrett clipped the leash to his collar. The new silver tag touched the ring and made a small sound. Both of them paused. Then Strider exhaled and walked forward. They made it past the mailbox that day. Not much farther. At the bend where the road opened toward the water, Strider stopped and looked back at the house. Barrett turned with him without asking for one more step. 2 mornings later, they reached the old bait shop. A week after that, on a clear, cold day when the sea looked almost black beneath the winter light, Strider walked all the way to the lighthouse path. Barrett did not celebrate any of it aloud. He simply learned the new map of their life. Some days the world was large. Some days it was the distance from the porch to the mailbox and back. Both counted. On Saturdays, they returned to Winter Harbor Animal Refuge. Barrett repaired things because his hands still needed honest work. He fixed a kennel latch that stuck in the cold. He replaced a cracked light cover. He carried food bags from Celia's supply room while Evan told him long stories about dogs who had invented new ways to avoid baths. Strider moved through the kennel rows slowly, the silver tag resting against his collar. At first, some of the dogs barked at him. Strider did not answer. He would pause near one door, sniff once, then choose a place on the floor outside the kennel and lie down. No command, no demonstration, no useful trick. He simply stayed. One afternoon, a young shepherd mix named Juniper refused to leave the back corner of her run. She had arrived shaking, thin, and suspicious of every hand. Celia sat outside the kennel for 20 minutes with a treat she did not offer. Evan tried leaving the door open and walking away. Nothing changed. Strider lowered himself outside Juniper's door and rested his chin on his paws. Barrett sat on a bench across the hall, a screwdriver in one hand, pretending to be busy with a hinge that was already fixed. For a long time, Juniper did not move. Then her nose appeared at the edge of the shadow. Strider did nothing. That was the gift. After another minute, she came close enough to sniff through the gap beneath the door. Celia looked at Barrett. Barrett looked down at the screwdriver. He did not make the moment bigger than it wanted to be. That evening, driving home, Barrett realized Strider had helped without working. He had comforted without command. He had done something useful without being used. The difference was everything. Not every night was gentle. There were still dreams that pulled Strider awake with shallow breaths. There were still afternoons when a truck door slammed down the road and he moved behind Barrett's chair before remembering where he was. There were still days when his leg hurt and the walk ended at the porch steps. Barrett stopped trying to talk fear out of him. Instead, he opened doors. He lowered his hand. He made the room easy to leave so Strider could choose to stay. Late in winter, on an afternoon so clear the snowbanks shone blue in the shadows, Barrett sat on the porch with his coat open and both hands resting on the boards. The harbor bell sounded far away. Somewhere near the water, a gull complained to no one. Strider slept by the threshold, half in the house, half in the pale sunlight. The silver tag moved with each breath, a small sound. Metal against wood, name against home. Barrett looked at the bowl visible through the open door. He looked at the leash hanging on its hook. He looked at the old dog whose body carried the record of everything papers had tried to hide. He placed his hand on the porch boards beside him. 6 years earlier, when Strider vanished into smoke, Barrett had spent the rest of his life trying to finish an apology. He had imagined that if the impossible ever happened, if the dog ever came back, he would say sorry until the word repaired what time had broken. But apologies were sometimes another way of asking the wounded to comfort the one who survived, so he did not say it. Strider opened his eyes. Slowly, with the stiffness of age and weather, he rose. He took one step, then another, and lowered his muzzle into Barrett's palm. Barrett let his hand remain open. He did not ask to be forgiven. He did not ask Strider to remember the young dog he had been. He did not ask for proof that the old bond had survived unchanged. He only sat there while Strider breathed against his skin. The harbor road was quiet. Snow slipped from the porch roof in a soft whisper. Inside, the house held its doors open. Healing had not arrived like vindication. It had arrived as a bowl returned to the floor, a leash used in the morning, a dog sleeping without guarding every exit, a police sergeant learning that loyalty was not the right to keep asking for service. After 6 years of wrong names, transfers, files, and hands that treated him like property, Strider no longer had to do anything to deserve staying. He stayed because he was home. Sometimes healing does not look like a loud victory. It looks like a bowl placed back on the floor, a leash used again in the morning, and a tired old dog finally sleeping without having to guard the door. Strider's story reminds us that love is not proven by how much someone can still do for us. Real love gives the wounded room to rest, to remember, and to return at their own pace. And maybe grace often comes quietly like that, not as thunder, but as one's safe hand left open long enough for trust to come back. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about a loyal friend, a second chance, or a small mercy you never forgot. And if you want more stories like this, please like, share, and subscribe. May your home be filled with peace, patience, and the kind of love that never asks the broken to prove they are worth keeping.